Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of the Reach Out podcast. This is your host, Juan Pablo Borges, and I just want to thank you all for tuning in once again. If you're checking us out on Spotify or Apple Podcast, you can also get a visual of the full conversation on YouTube, not only today, but also on the previous episodes and all the episodes yet to come. Now, I want to introduce our guest for today. He's here to give us his perspective and advice on a very relevant topic for all of us. So please welcome Edwin Sours. Welcome in. How are you doing today?
Hey, Juan Pablo, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. We were just talking a little bit off camera for all of the listeners. And here in Houston, it looks like it's about to come a storm today. So just crossing our fingers that it's not the true, but other than that, we're just chilling, man.
That's great to hear. Yeah, it looks like it's going to storm, but we'll get through it. And I'm definitely excited to be here. It's a great podcast you have, Juan Pablo, and look forward to our discussion.
I appreciate the kind words, man. I look forward to it too. Edwin, tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you grew up, your school, your job, just a quick spill.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Edwin Sours. I originally am from Phoenix, Arizona, but grew up mainly in Tennessee region, Memphis, Tennessee, to be more specific. Went to middle school and high school out there, but actually attended University of Houston for a supply chain and logistics management degree. More specifically, after that, stage of my life, I got an internship with HPE or Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and from there, got a full time offer within different teams that I've been kind of transitioning towards. But overall, really, really happy. Um, I'm based here in Houston, Texas now, so I'm living out here, enjoying it, and really just looking forward to this discussion as well.
That's amazing, man. Now that knowing that you're in Houston, great city, I'm in Houston as well, and the city is known for its wide variety of food and just like great restaurants. So just why don't you tell us what's your favorite restaurant here in Houston?
Favorite restaurant, man, that's a good question. I definitely like El Tiempo a lot. The Mexican food there is really, really solid. But honestly, just in general, Houston has so many diverse sets of foods. Like I'll go to Bel Air sometimes to get some Asian food and just different areas, which is awesome because I have a wide palate. I don't like just one specific type of thing. But no, it's definitely like you said, really, really great city. I'm enjoying it thus far.
Totally, man. Mexican food here is just another level. I'm from Colombia, and I remember I went to this little restaurant called Mi Pueblito, which is amazing because it's very good quality Colombian food, and the staff is all Colombian as well. So it's just like just a little piece of home here in Houston, which is worth mentioning. But today, for everybody, we're going to talk about the idea of doing the easy thing versus doing the right thing. We all have those two paths in front of us every single day. And when it comes to our development as students or professionals or both, it is the small choices that really pave the way towards our results. So, Edwin, how has going for the correct route instead of the easy route help you become the professional that you are today?
It's a great first question. There's going to be a lot of different avenues you can take once you join the workforce, or if you're wrapping up your kind of college years, right? And to your point, right there's always the easy way out, right? There's the easy things you could do versus kind of the right things, and I don't really call them the right things, but I call them more the difficult path, right? You're going to make mistakes during your kind of difficult path, but it's going to make you a better person, but also a better professional. I think for me personally, one of the key elements is development, right? And not just in schooling and owning your major and the school work that you do, but when you become a professional, no one's going to kind of babysit you in terms of development. It's something that you have to own. And like I said, right, it could be a difficult path because you're fresh out of college, you don't really know much just yet about the your company or your work experience. So it's important to like ask yourself, right, what's important in your life, professionally and socially, and kind of build a plan around that, right? Just to really ask yourself those questions. How do I see myself 3 years, 5 years from now? what are those goals, and you'll start to kind of see a path towards that. Now, the easy thing could just be, hey, I'm out of college, I'm collecting a paycheck, or I need to finish my assignments for schoolwork. And you can just kind of go through the motions and let it be, right? And then 5 years, 10 years pass, and you're kind of stuck in the same position. Maybe you're not achieving those things you want to do in life. So to me, like the most important thing to distinguish either category, right, is planning, right, and just owning your own development.
Definitely. Edwin, you mentioned something that I think is pretty interesting, not calling it the right thing but a difficult thing. Because let's be honest, like some things are going to be easy and they're going to be the right thing to do along the way. But it's pretty important to keep that in mind that not all of the easy things that you do are going to be the right thing to do, especially if they just grant you um, momentarily pleasure, you know? So I think that you just mentioned is pretty important. And for all of you out there, Edwin and I, we spoke a couple weeks ago, and something that you said, Edwin, that stuck with me was knowing when to ask for help. The importance of differentiating between an actual problem and something that you can work out yourself. So, why don't you elaborate on that idea a little bit more for the listeners?
No, that's a great point. Yeah. In terms of seeking help, right, and it kind of tied back to the right path versus the easy thing, right? The easy thing to do is, you see a problem come up, right, or an issue, or you're struggling with some schoolwork. The easy thing to do is just to, give up, right, or just ignore it, right? See if the problem goes away. But the right thing or the difficult thing to do is to go seek help, right? One of the biggest things that you'll kind of see in the professional world is um, you're going to get problems sometimes that are bigger than you or your role. And so learning to go, hey, I need to go talk to this specific function or this specific subject matter expert to understand the root cause of the problem and communicate my opinion, what I think of it, but also allow them to provide their insights so that the problem can get solved, right? Or at least we can have a path towards a solution. In school, right, you get a lot of homework, you get a lot of different lectures. So like I said, right, it's really easy to just sit back and like, hey, you know what, I'll just kind of, Google this or just, ignore it. But in reality, you're not getting the best out of that school if you're not going to go, hey, I need to go talk to the tutor, right? Hey, I need to go ask my roommate or someone who knows more about this to help me understand this, to learn, right? It's like that continuous improvement, that continuous learning type of mindset. So seeking help is super important. And I think one of the big benefits too that you realize when you seek help is it makes you vulnerable to other people, right? You can acknowledge, hey, I don't know this thing or I don't know this problem to the nth degree. And it allows you to one, learn more, but also create trust with individuals, right? You start to, seek out help, and that person knows, hey, this Edwin, for example, he reached out to me. He tried to learn this specific problem or a specific area, and because of that, I trust that individual that he's going to do the right thing in his role or in his schoolwork, right? So it definitely helps you build a lot of bonds or trust with folks.
100%, 100%. And something that you just mentioned that really made me remember second episode, or it was the third episode, I think, with Hussein. Hussein was speaking about you can do as much work as you want to. You can just show out every single day and put your 100% effort. But if you don't have someone inside the corporation, like a mentor or someone in a leadership position that really notices the effort that you're putting in, then it's going to be really difficult to move forward without those relationships built on trust. So that's definitely a very good point. Um, I'm going to be honest. For me, it's somewhat easy to just fall back and do things that don't really contribute to my objective of being the best version of myself. And that's the key. The key thing is that it's easy to do those things. So just like what you mentioned when you start your first job and get complacent and you look down the pipe and this years and you're stuck in the same position, and like with your classes what you mentioned, not being resourceful and just putting the just enough effort to barely passing your classes, and or will you give up on your hobbies? So Edwin, what advice would you give to those people that just keep choosing to do the easy things instead of the hard things or the right things?
No, it's a really good question, right? I mean, to your earlier point, it's easy to get complacent in certain areas, right? So to tie back to my earlier point, is it's really just understanding your plan or your development, right? Like what your goals are in your profession or in school, right? When you identify that goal, whether it's, hey, I want to be a people leader or a manager, or I want to graduate with, honors, right? Um, put that as like your main goal or your priority, and work backwards, right? Learn to kind of create a timeline for yourself of steps you can take towards achieving that goal. In my perspective, right, I eventually want to become a people leader, right? So I have that as a main goal for me. And, along that, I developed a plan of like, I need to build a breadth of knowledge within my role, right? And company, understand the end to end perspective. But in addition to that, I need to have experience managing programs, projects that are valued within the company, because that's going to help me create trust and relationships with others. And you kind of just start creating that little path for you. So the first thing is always about, having that development plan, right? The other piece that I would say is, it's really important, especially early on in your career, right, to know your role, know your job, right, so that you don't get complacent, right? Meaning, um, I recommend this to everyone who's joining the workforce, right? Is like read your job description, right? Read your job role, understand what that means within your company, right? And then understand the KPIs or the key performance indicators within your role, right? That's going to allow you to like really just kind of focus in on quick wins first, right? And okay, my job role is about cost reductions and optimizing costs. So I'm going to focus on that bucket first. And then I'll eventually master that and move on to the next piece and the next piece, right? So in order to stop that complacency, you always have to be working towards something, right? If you kind of let yourself just get, best way to say it is that if you let yourself just be a cog in the machine, you're just going to eventually like get burnt out, and you're not really going to look back and say, oh, I developed certain skill sets, right? I achieved my goal that I had set out before, right? So complacency is definitely something that can be mitigated, right? If you just have a good plan, right? And you be honest with yourself about that plan, right? You're not going to achieve everything, right, in the first year, the second year. So it's important to set the end goal and work backwards, right? See where you need to go.
That's very true, and that's very well said. Especially, I think it really resonates with me, um, having like a specific end goal, regardless of putting in the efforts of knowing what you want to be somewhat vaguely in the future. Like obviously people say, I want to own my own company, like I want to have a lot of money, I want to be happy. But if you don't have like that specific title or that specific position that you want to achieve by a determined period of time, it's going to be really difficult to not um, be persistent and not be resilient within those objectives. And I think something that you mentioned as well, which is working towards having a leadership position in a company such as HPE and beginning from like a starter position right at college. You and I used to talk about 2 weeks ago how it's kind of like a difficult path to uh, leadership whenever you're young, whenever you're starting in these companies. So, what advice would you give to all those people that are just starting out right at college or in their internships that want to develop the leadership experiences?
No, that's a great point. Like I mean, you mentioned and we talked about it earlier, right? I mean, it doesn't just get handed to you right away, especially coming out of college, right? Obviously, there's a level of experience that you need to have. But I think one thing I always, one of my there's a few things, right? But one of the first things that I got taught early on by one of my first managers, who is essentially kind of a mentor to me now, is breadth versus depth, right? In terms of your role, right? Is once you get to the company, you're learning so many different things, and just different processes, networking with different people, understanding the overall mission statement and value of your company. So early on in your career, I definitely advise folks take a position of breadth versus depth, right? If you're like in supply chain, for example, do you want to have depth of what an end-to-end supply chain looks like? Or do you want to be a depth person, right? Where, hey, I want to become a subject matter expert in planning or forecasting. I want to understand logistics to the nth degree, right? Like make that determination early on in your career because that's going to feed your path in terms of leadership, right? Once you understand, okay, hey, I really enjoy data analytics and planning. So I want to build a huge foundation in that area. You're able to kind of see and seek mentorship from folks who have done that, right? And go talk to them and understand the path that they took. While you're gaining that work experience, you already kind of have a road to leading you to experience, right? Or sorry, leadership experience. If you take the avenue like I took, where I looked at it more as depth, sorry, breadth, I wanted to kind of, I understood end to end, right? I wanted to look at things end to end. I always saw kind of supply chain as a puzzle with many different things. So I wanted to build that end to end perspective. And one of the things that I did was I always kind of volunteered myself for different projects that were out of my, I wouldn't say experience, right, or depth. I may not be the most knowledgeable person on logistics or planning or engineering, but I took on those projects and worked with folks who did have that experience because I wanted to build that breadth of knowledge, right? That's the path that I took. Others would take the depth process, like I mentioned, right? And they say, hey, I really enjoy planning. I want to develop a foundation there, and now I can eventually become a leadership person. So that's one aspect, right? Is like early on in career, breadth versus depth. Like make that determination. The other piece, right, is kind of like tied together, which is mentorship and feedback, right? Like you were mentioning, right? You're young and early in your career, so you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna learn a lot of different things, but it's always important to kind of reflect back and seek feedback from projects, from um, different programs that you may have led or worked on. So, after you finish something or have accomplished something with a group of individuals or colleagues, go back and seek feedback from them, right? Like, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What are my strong skill sets? What are things that I can work on short term, long term? And that again, it'll feed into your development plan, but also highlight the areas you need to work on so that you can identify those weaknesses and work towards them and eventually become a more holistic leader, right? So all these little things, right, you can do on early in your career. The other aspect is mentorship, right? Once you understand the breadth versus depth piece, go seek mentors that have followed a path that you align towards, right? Leaders that have lead organizations you're interested in, or folks who have had similar background in terms of majors or education than you, and go use that, right? Like use their experience to kind of help you gain more.
That is amazing. You touched on a lot of points over there, and I do think that implementing that concept of breadth versus depth in your career and your professional development is essential. I never heard about it, to be honest, but it's something that I'm really going to implement because it is true. You just go into your first position thinking that, okay, I'm just like going to learn as much as I can about everything that I can. I'm going to help out everyone that I can help out, just trying to stand out. And to me, that sounds like a lot in a plate, you know?
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
not
and
doing.
that's why I say like early on in your career, it helps because to your point, everything's coming at you at once, right? You can get very confused, and at the end of the day, you also have to like learn how to connect with people in a big corporation or even a small one. So like, if you make that distinction between breadth and depth, it helps you focus your attention on certain areas, right? It's definitely something that when my first manager told me that, it definitely stuck with me, and it's something I still follow to this day because it's very helpful, I would say.
Definitely. And you also touched on feedback and really pay attention to it because, at least for me, when I listen to all these great people like yourself, especially the guests in the podcast and other like professionals that I've talked to, and they gave me like all this advice, like ask questions, do this, do that, say this, and like as much as you don't want to, a part of it just goes over your head and you kind of forget about it until it hits you right in front of you. You know, I recall a time recently where I was just like in this small meeting in my internship with this uh, person in a leadership position. She ended her presentation, and all the interns were in attendance, and she said, "What questions do you have?" And to be honest, the presentation was pretty straightforward. So initially, I didn't have any questions, but she said, "Listen, if you're not gonna ask any questions, we're not gonna leave this room. We're not gonna go to break. Like everyone has to ask at least one question, or you're not getting out of here." I'm like, "Oh crap!" And then it's just like a little incentive to
Yeah.
breaking down the barriers and having that like learning mentality, as you mentioned. You know?
Yeah. No, that's a great point, right? And it's funny that you say no questions, right? Because like, sometimes it could be very straightforward, but I always like when I'm in that situation, I always kind of like if I truly understand what they presented very well and have no kind of process questions or knowledge questions, I always kind of go out like, well, okay, I understand this, but what if, what would you do differently is kind of my go-to, right?
Yeah.
What were your lessons learned, right? So that at least kind of gives them the impression that you digested their information correctly, right? And that you're interested in learning more, right? Yeah, it's that's funny.
Yeah, no, it's a good advice. You should like
Yeah,
work your way into asking questions, and eventually you'll find yourself asking about something that you really thought you understood, but not really. So
yeah.
it's always a good thing. And connecting that to my next question, Edwin, having a student mentality and asking questions every time you get the chance to is something that, as you mentioned, you and I talked in the past. But has there been a moment in your life where having that student mentality worked out in your favor?
I think so. I mean, curiosity is always good, right? And continuous learning is great. But, um, when you get into the professional world, you sometimes forget some of the principles that you learned in school, meaning, you could always go research things, right? Meaning I could go pull up a book about, supply chain strategy or logistics or sourcing and learn about the theoretical pieces of those concepts, right? So that's definitely something that I borrow from my schooling days, meaning, they teach you how to research, they teach you how to find articles, resources, and tools you could use to stay up to speed on the market and things of that nature. So I use that in my job today. No one's going to ask you to do it. No one's going to say, hey, go read this article, right, in your job. It's something that I just know that if I can continue to iron, my knowledge base and stay curious on that certain industry or function, it's going to serve me well. And I think one of the things that I've learned too, talking to different leaders within my company and just old, more experienced, seasoned folks is um, they love interns and younger folks who are joining the company, early career folks, because they bring a fresh perspective, right? And they bring these new ideas, new exciting things. Like, as an example, and this is hilarious, right? We hear about crypto and blockchain and all these technologies, right? And we're running projects in our company centered around those things, and not crypto specifically, but blockchain technology, right? And so when I took an interest in that, and I talked to the folks driving that project, and I talked about what I learned in school about blockchain and the different articles that I read and books that I read about it, they lit up, right? Because they're like, oh my gosh, this kid has an interest in this. Let me go teach him some other stuff he may not know, right? So having that continuous learning and just curiosity also helps you build relationships with folks, right? Work is similar in that regard with work. Sorry, school is similar in that regard to work, right? Where you can build friendships and a network based on your interest. And if you continue to just, dive into those articles and research, it'll help you in your job for sure.
100%. That's very, very well said. And that is such a great story to mention right now because, you know, people are going to just give you a task and you know deep down that if you want to stand out, you're gonna have to be resourceful, as we mentioned, doing what you do, looking up articles, going out of your way to do what's like more than what's expected you to do, you know? So I like that story actually reminded me of there's this podcast called Supply Chain Now,
Yep.
and it's a really good one. And they had this guest a few weeks ago, and he created this like sourcing automation company. And I remember just like thinking the day before about some of the hobbies or some of the ways that I could start my own thing in the industry, like learning more about it. I remember just having like this idea of having like a local sourcing automated like platform that works only on artificial intelligence. And I thought like this is so cool. Like how did I came up with this? Like this, there's no way. So I just started looking up on it and just like I was really really excited about it. And I really thought this could be like a thing. And then the next day I listened to the episode with that guest, and he was like, yeah, this is what I do. This is what my company's about. This is the product that we offer. And it was down to the details, exactly what I was thinking about the day before. And it was just like, oh, well, not that I was like bummed out about it, but like now I really want to learn from this person. Like, how did he came up with it? Because he has the real experience, and learning from all those people and building relationships is like the real baseline of a prosperous career and a prosperous student mentality, as you mentioned.
Yeah, no,
So
that's funny, right? And I think it sucks maybe you didn't get the idea sooner, right? But I think you can still learn from that, right? And we're in this new age where information is everywhere, right? Internet is allowed us to research anything. I mean, now you're seeing Chat GPT where it's like automating a bunch of different, rudimentary tasks for folks, right? So it's to me, it's not about like um, your ideas anymore, right? It's more so about you being able to consume information and learn on an ongoing basis and digest that information and learnings and create connections and strategies around that, right? There's no like, there's so much that's been done in the world in tech and, in supply chain and oil and gas. So you have to, just like learn how to improve and optimize things. And you do that by, researching and learning from others. Connecting with folks is always great too because you can learn from their experiences, like you, right? You guys had the same idea, but someone took action there. So like, what did you learn from that, right? What did that person kind of do that made him stand out?
definitely, and like I've been trying for the longest time to get him as a guest. So hopefully he listens to this and he'll remember.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And Edwin, moving on, you told me about how figuring out what you want to do and who you want to be is essential because by knowing that you'll know what you're getting into and most importantly the sacrifices that you have to make down the line. So just for the listeners, would you care on elaborating on that idea a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, early on in your career, and even as you're kind of finishing up school, you have to be truthful to yourself around what your goals are, right? And as we spoke earlier, right, once you have kind of your development plan, and where you want to go in terms of your goals, it allows you to kind of reflect throughout the process and be honest about yourself, meaning you have your North Star, right? So if along the journey things are hard, you still have your North Star and you say, hey, look, I'm learning, and this is difficult, but I'll get there. I'll get there eventually. If you don't have that development plan, right, that becomes difficult because you just start becoming emotional throughout the process where you're kind of like, hey, I don't know what I want out of this job. I don't know what I want out of my career. Do I really want to take this position? Do I not? So once you have that North Star, it allows you to kind of focus and be more logical and say, hey, you know what, taking on this new role is going to help me eventually reach my goals, right? So being truthful to yourself is one of the big aspects, right? And things change, right? I mean, priorities change. Maybe you start a family early on and you want to focus on that and you kind of pivot to a different area or a different goal. So it's an evergreen process. It's not something that once you have your North Star, that's the only thing, right? There's ways you can change that, but being truthful about that to yourself is good, right? No one's gonna, people will give you feedback, right? But no one's gonna tell you what you should or shouldn't do. It's up to you, and you have to own that.
100%. 100% is very true. And Edwin, Hewlett Packard is a great company. We were talking a little bit offline about how UH students, especially I know students from the program and excellence of selling or PES, they tend to gravitate towards that great company. And we were talking a little bit more about the interns that are just participating there this summer. And I'm going to be honest, part of the reason why uh, I have you on the podcast, and I'm also having a couple more people that work at HPE in the next few weeks on. Part of the reason was because I know that they could really use some advice from you guys. So just from all the guys participating in their summer internship at HPE, what do you have to say to them?
Yeah, so first of all, we have like over 120 interns. Not all of them UH, right? But we do have a solid group of folks interning here at HPE. HPE's headquarter office actually recently just moved to Houston, right? So the HQ here, headquarters, is now in Houston, moved over from Silicon Valley and San Jose area. And I call that out as an important aspect because, to your point, HPE is going to continue to build a relationship with the University of Houston, and they're going to want to leverage those student base, right? And I think one of the unique aspects that University of Houston has versus other universities, right, is that a lot of the professors have real world experience, real work experience in these different companies. So they
Mhm.
give it to you straight. They give you tips and tricks along the way on top of your actual studies and in terms of your major. Now, specific to what I would advise interns, right? You already kind of called it out, right? Is always have questions. Um, no one's going to expect you to solve, these massive complex problems right away. So ask questions, learn, right? The second thing is I would definitely take advantage of all the different events that these companies host. I know HPE, we're great about work-life balance, so we have a lot of networking and personal development events for interns, as well as social aspects like taking them out to Astros games. So leverage those opportunities because it creates, in my opinion, two things, right? One, you're able to connect with your fellow interns, right? Folks that are kind of in your age bracket or in the same stage in their career. And those are the folks that are like be leaders, 10 years from now, right? Working at different companies. So start building your network with those interns right away. The second thing is it helps you to like connect with the actual full-time employees, right?
Mm.
In a more relaxed environment, right? Meaning you start to create those relationships with folks that have been with a company for 5, 10 years, 20 years, and you're able to seek advice. You're able to find interests that you guys share, right? Whether it's like as an example, sports, right, or cars. You guys find interest, and that creates again another relationship because my overall advice to interns really is once college is over, it's really up to you to develop your network. Having those people and connections. And it's not all LinkedIn, right? It's not just, hey, I'm going to go follow somebody and connect with them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's having those coffee chats, right? It's finding interests that you guys can relate to. So definitely leverage all the events that HP puts on and other companies do because those are great opportunities to network without putting so much pressure on yourself.
That's some good advice, man. And I wish all the best of luck to all the people interning at HPE. Y'all are very lucky, and I'm very proud of y'all. Um, Closing this episode, Edwin, this is probably my favorite question because this is a question I get to ask all the guests. So please tell us what makes you happy, man.
What makes me happy? Well, I haven't heard all your answers in your different podcasts, but I hope that this hasn't been repeated, right? My what makes me happy is definitely seeing others happy and making other people happy, right? I take joy from giving. Um, Being able to help somebody in a time of need is something that really makes me feel good. I'm the oldest brother of four, so getting to teach them, getting to share my knowledge and experience with them is something that makes me truly happy, and that's definitely it.
That is, man, dude, that is the truth. That is just like baseline, having positive
Yeah.
impact of other people. And I'm also a brother. I'm the youngest out of my two older brothers, but I also have a younger sister, and having impact not only on them but also on my friends and other people is very, very rewarding. You know, as I'm sure you
I
know.
definitely
So
agree.
that's very true. I want to thank you all again for tuning in. Make sure to give us a rating and review on wherever you listen to us on. We're on TikTok, on Instagram, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So I'll see you guys in the next one.